have with us Deepak Visweswaraiah, VP, Platform Engineering and Site Managing Director of Pegasystems. Welcome, Deepak. Thank you for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and I'm very excited to jump into this conversation with you.
Thank you, Pranam.
So, Deepak, to start with, can you introduce yourself and tell something about Pegasystems? What does the company does, and what are its products and everything?
Absolutely. Like we talked about, my name is Deepak Visweswaraiah, and I play two roles for Pega. One, as Vice President of Platform Engineering, I run all of our platform engineering, which is essentially the product that we build, all the product engineering out of India. And secondly, I'm also the managing director for Pega in India. We have about 1/3 of the company across our sites, both in Hyderabad and in Bangalore. And I manage all of our India operations as such. If you think about what Pega does, right, it's actually an enterprise AI-driven platform to be able to handle workflow automation and decision making, right? Those are the three primary things. It's an enterprise platform. You actually have the capability to be able to automate and really solve all your workflow problems, as well as be able to make decisions in terms of based on data, based on all of the AI power that is built into the product for your customer interactions or what have you. We also, essentially, our clients develop applications on top of our platform, on top of this low-code platform, to be able to build those applications in a very, very short time frame, right? To be able to solve their business problems. We also actually build and sell certain horizontal or applications that are generic, like a customer service application or a customer decision hub application, or certain industry-specific applications like CLM, KYC, or fraud detection, or so some of the smart applications in the financial industry, or healthcare, or others for that matter, right? In a very small way. That's really how I would actually say what Pega does.
So jumping straight into what is trending, that is Gen AI. Like everybody loves to talk about it. So this is what Pegasystem also deals into. We know that Gen AI is like doing all our routine tasks. It can write for us, it can create graphics, and every routine activity we can take assistance from artificial intelligence. So can you tell us about something like how can organization harness the creative potential of Gen AI beyond doing the automating and routine tasks?
Well, that's a great question to get things started. You're right, absolutely. I don't think there is any kind of a meeting or an interview or a discussion that happens without actually getting into generative AI as a topic for that matter, right? So I personally think the potential for opportunities to leverage generative AI as a technology is enormous. And I think that's probably why it is so ubiquitous today in terms of how fast it is actually spreading in the market, right? You can pretty much think about leveraging it in any domain. I don't think it is any domain agnostic at all, in the sense that you can use it as much as you want in terms of whether that is in the BFSI versus whether that is in oil and gas versus healthcare versus anything else for that matter, right? So I think like what you talked about, automating routine tasks is one thing, which is predominantly what most people actually do, and I think that is actually done. I think where the value really is going beyond in terms of being able to leverage this technology to be able to do other creative things, right? I'll share a few that are on top of my head for that matter, right? One is the ability to create content. I think you just mentioned it in terms of how easy and how good it is to be able to create that content. It's actually able to do that mainly because of the access that it actually has to the vast amounts of data, and the ability to be able to process that data, to be able to identify patterns, to be able to actually recommend things to be able to personalize, leverage it to personalize content, for example, right? I mean, one good thing, from a content creation perspective is if you think about language translation, right? It has made it so much more easier, right? Do you need to know French to be able to turn something into, a French write-up? It will probably give you 90+% accurate, translation, right? That may be good enough for most people, for most use cases, right? So, that's a great use case, in terms of from a content creation perspective. You talked about, its ability to be able to create pictures, and more so very recently in the last few months, it can actually create videos. It can create videos in terms of, based on your prompt, in terms of what you ask for, right? You can actually just ask for it to create a video of me sitting in a park, one summer morning, and it'll actually give you a video. It's amazing in terms of its ability to be able to create such content. So content creation, I would say, is one big thing. Second, I would say, is also in terms of design and innovation, leveraging generative AI to be able to accelerate, brainstorm your design and innovation aspects of things. You can brainstorm your new product ideas, your new service ideas in terms of being able to figure out the market data, what, all the business case that you want to be able to put together, a what do you call a prototype that you want to be able to create, what have you. A fantastic example for that is the Pega generative AI blueprint. We created a tool called Blueprint, which we can talk more about, but it's a fantastic example of how we leveraged the 40 years knowledge of Pega in being able to solve and create complex workflows, combined with the power of generative AI, and put something together that our clients, or anyone for that matter, clients, partners, any users who can go to a Pega website without having any prior knowledge, be able to really generate a blueprint for an application kind of thing, right? I mean, it really helps design and innovation for that matter. The third part of it is probably we actually also look at being able to leverage for training and development, or most people call it learning and development as well, right? To be able to personalize training, you can leverage generative AI to really figure out what skills your employees need. What if you are actually in an ed tech or some field like that, how do you personalize your material to somebody who is coming in as a persona, to leverage your content or what have you? How do you develop interactive simulation? Also, some people call it as Socratic learning, right? In terms of ability to be able to have a two-way conversation, to be able to expand and dive into more details. Right? This is kind of what teachers talking to, let's say, students use that technology to be able to get to deeper understanding of a topic for that matter, let's say, right? A good example in terms of that we have leveraged it in Pega is to be able to train customer service agents in our customer service application. So think about this: in every customer service in a contact center environment, the agents, the customer service representatives, change pretty rapidly, right? There are new agents coming up, or you start a new program or whatever you. And how do you train these customer service representatives to be able to do the right thing? Now, what we have done is to be able to implement generative AI within the application to train customer service agents or representatives, where the product or the tool will act like a customer and will start asking questions to customer service representative to train them into terms of how to talk to real customers. Right? I think that's a fantastic use case to leverage in the future, as far as what all different things it can actually do, right? Apart from that, I talked about Socratic learning. There are things in terms of querying use cases. Voice AI is another great, ability to be able to integrate using generative AI, and then things like that. Potentially solving or addressing security risks and vulnerabilities. That's a great use case again for generative AI. So there are plenty for us to be able to think about. I think we're only scratching the surface right now in what we are doing, but the opportunities are massive. Does that answer, or give you a few areas where we look to be able to in the future, incorporate more rather than just being able to use it for regular automation?
So, Deepak, you mentioned about Pega's GenAI blueprint. I'm sure our viewers would like to know more about it. So, how does it aligns with industry practices, and what makes it different from other products that we have already in the industry in terms of transparency and accountability?
Yeah, the Pega blueprint is probably one of my favorite topics. I can't stop talking about it or using it, when I have conversations with our clients or partners or what have you. Right? Pega, generative AI blueprint. What it does is it enables teams, it enables anyone to be able to accelerate their journey from idea to implementation. If you have an idea, how do you take it into an implementation level? It accelerates that entire process. It essentially empowers, think of it as a business leader who is trying to transform application ideas into an interactive application. Right? In being able to take that. A business leader actually has something in his mind. He wants to be able to capture that all in one place to be able to solve a problem from end to end, actually go design the entire thing. Think of it as, let's say, for example, you want to be able to build a house. How do you go about building a house? You just don't go and start pouring concrete somewhere and building walls, right? You actually first think about in terms of, what do I want in this house? You would actually think about it in terms of being able to say, yep, I want that many, bedrooms, I want the kitchen, I want this, I want that. You kind of put all your requirements down. And then you start looking at being able to hand those requirements to an architect or somebody who is an expert to be able to actually lay it out for you. Once it is laid out in terms of, okay, where is what? Okay, this is going to be bedroom, this is going to be our and then really in terms of laying it all out in a way that one can understand it. Once that is done, you can actually go back and tweak in terms of, what, I don't necessarily like this here. Can we move this there or what have you? So you do a little bit of an interactive way to be able to tweak things to how you want it. And then you actually have a blueprint that you can actually take and give it to a person who is actually an expert in building something where they start actually marking things out and start building things, right? That's exactly how the Pega Gen AI blueprint actually works. What it does is it helps broaden the access to application design, enabling our clients and partners to more quickly learn how to design optimized applications to bring them all the way online, right? Unlike other generative AI, applications, I would say, or the development tools that are out there, they just create more code. We don't necessarily just believe in creating more code because we are actually a low-code platform for that matter, right? So the Pega generative AI, blueprint focuses on being able to deliver value, being able to deliver an optimized workflow design and decision-making capability, right? The blueprint encompasses all workflow stages. In the Pega parlance, it actually takes a user through the entire what we refer to as case lifecycle, right? It allows somebody to actually create, give their initial requirements in terms of what is it that I'm trying to look for or what is it that I'm trying to build. Then it actually creates all of the what we refer to as case types. And for each case type, it actually builds out all of the data model, the live data sources that it requires, the personas that actually play in the application environment, and really in final it produces a blueprint that you can either actually create a PDF document to have a conversation with an IT technologist, or you can actually create what we refer to as a JSON blueprint which allows you to be able to import that whole thing into a Pega environment, where somebody has a Pega license, and you can actually have an application running up and running in no time, right? You can actually do this all in minutes rather than what it takes people to be able to do it in weeks or months, for that matter, right? So it's a simple jump to application deployment by leveraging the Gen AI blueprint. Right? That's really what it does.
Talking about the businesses, like there are these big players who are already thriving and making advanced AI developments. We know that, we can witness that. But coming to the Indian marketplace, what cultural shift do you see is necessary for Indian enterprises to embrace Gen AI or hyper automations?
That's an interesting question, more so from an India perspective, right? I've always looked at from an India environment, overall ecosystem perspective. There are actually two angles, right? There are a bunch of us, or there is a segment of people where we leverage generative AI or other such technologies to be able to build products that is consumed by someone, right? That can be consumed by either corporations within India or outside, or anywhere for the world, or what have you. So there is one section of it where people leverage such technology to be able to develop things. I think in that segment, we're doing very well. I think we're placed very well. People have jumped on that wagon. Probably, I recently read a report where it says one in every 6 lines of code written in generative AI is actually out of India, right? So I think we're doing phenomenally well from that point of view. It is great. I think when it matters to adopting technology for value, right? I think that's where we are lagging behind as a country. If you look at it in terms of how do you leverage such technology that is actually developed to be able to increase value, to be able to, just what you're talking about, to be able to leverage for what we do. And in my mind, here are some a couple of things that come to my mind as far as what do we need to do in the country to be able to actually be on the forefront of not only developing the technology, but also adopting it for the best use cases or for most efficiency or what have you, right? Number one, I think, is about the mindset shift. It's really about how we think and what we do. When I say that, what I mean by that is most Indian companies are looking at generative AI or this automation part of it as a way for cost cutting rather than value creation, right? Going beyond seeing automation solely as a cost cutting measure, and then focusing on how we can actually leverage hyper automation and generative AI to create value, I think makes a huge difference. It's about our ability to embrace innovation, embrace experimentation, embracing that we need to upskill the workforce to be able to deal with it. I think that's the mindset shift that is required in our enterprises in India to be able to make move forward. I think number two, there is another very interesting aspect. There's a lot of discussion around this that actually happens, and I'm sure you get this question all the time. Is about collaboration and trust with respect to AI systems, right? How do you actually, without having to fear about am I losing my jobs or what have you, how do you build a human and AI collaboration going, right? We want to be able to foster a culture that views humans and AI as complementary forces, right? Something that work together to achieve desired outcomes. That's what we want to be able to look at it as, and have enough trust or build enough trust in AI that we can put the right governance models in place, and to be able to leverage that and ensure have enough transparency that nobody is really worried about leveraging AI as a technology per se, right? I think that is that's the second big shift that we should look at in the country. Lastly, I would say about being agile in terms of adopting such technology. I think that's one of the things we lack a little bit is that, we are not necessarily aggressive enough being able to adopt such technology, right? We should be breaking, any silos within organizations that we have. We need to be able to build the culture in terms of looking at the data, to be able to get the right patterns, to be able to leverage it for decision making, just so that organizations can be agile and move as fast as how the market actually is moving. Very specifically to India, I think I talked about language barriers earlier, right? In terms of content generation. If you think about how many different languages we have in India, I think generative AI is a fantastic way for us to be able to cross some of those language barriers, local language barriers within India. That's probably one area that comes to my mind that can be a huge leverage, as well as potential investment in infrastructure development to be able to leverage such technology, right? I think if we can embrace that mind shift, that building collaboration and trust, being able to really focus on organizational agility, those things will actually help put us in the forefront of being able to leverage such technology. I know that was a longer answer probably than you expected, but
Very much for bringing this topic, like how do we fit this synchronization between AI and human roles? There's this whole debate that is AI going to eliminate jobs and traditional job roles? This is a debate that is talked about a lot. So I would like to get some of your views, like as Gen AI is getting advanced, how do you address the potential threats it poses to traditional job roles?
yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure again, yeah, this is another question I'm sure you get pretty much in everyone who talks to you about it in terms of what you hear in the industry, right? There is this understanding of, okay, is there going to be job displacement? If we think about threats from generative AI, probably that's the foremost question that you will get, right? Are people going to lose jobs as generative AI automates some of the routine tasks and what have you? With increasing complexity, repetitive and routine jobs are the ones that are at risk. I think that is pretty well known now, is that, if you are actually doing, completely repetitive and routine jobs, yes, those can potentially be automated reasonably easily and can actually be displaced. That is why it is, important to be able to understand what that risk is or where that risk is, right? Number two, second threat from from generative AI is really about skill gaps, right? The rise of generative AI has or will require some shift in people's skills. We know that for now, just in terms of how it is advanced over the last couple of years. Jobs will more likely than not require more creativity, require more critical thinking, require problem-solving capabilities, and adaptation skills in terms of to complement what we have learned before as humans, right? And then, in order to improve. That's really where the human, if I say advantage is as well, that cannot be replaced as easily, by artificial intelligence for that matter. While AI can automate repetitive tasks, it can't really quite match the human creativity and intuition, at least not yet, let's say, right? Software engineering relies pretty heavily on creativity and innovation in order to be able to design and architect systems at scale, right? So, I don't necessarily look at new technology as something that eliminates jobs. We have actually, gone through several journeys before of technology transformations, right? And it has never really, taken anything away from humans other than being able to help us do things better, right? So in order to make this smoother, what can we do? We can, I think we talked a little bit about it earlier in terms of how can we make sure there is human and AI collaboration. We look at this as instead of looking generative AI as a replacement, tool, we should start seeing it as a tool to augment what we do, as to augment human capabilities. focus on being able to redesign your workflows, redesign your software, redesign your operational activities or what have you, and leverage the strength of what it does. Think about being able to redesign jobs. To that end, you can analyze what the existing job does and look at in terms of if you were to take away some of the routine parts of it, how can this person or how can this human person, being actually do things of higher cognitive skills or higher strategy, higher, or be for being able to focus on innovation or other things, right? How do we build lifelong learning culture? That is what will actually help us navigate such transformations easily. We ought to be in a learning cycle all the way through. We need to be learning those skill sets that are required to leverage generative AI in our environments, in a much better fashion, right? How can we be transparent and communicate that to our employees? I don't think we should be afraid about it. We got to be running towards it to be able to to be able to handle it, right? If not, someday or the other, somebody is going to come and do that for you if we don't do it ourselves, right? That's really the thought process, right? So those are some of the things I think we can do in order to build a smoother transition to the threats of AI for that matter, right? And I think that's those are probably ways to think about rather than worrying about is it going to take away our jobs.
Right, Deepak, I totally agree with you. There might be a transition, manual jobs can get automated, but it's still a question that Gen AI will match human creativity or not.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. Having said that, let's see it from an enterprise perspective. How do enterprises can strike a balance between automation efficiency and still maintaining that human touch when they are interacting with their customers?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think people really have to think about it. That important in terms of being able to strike a balance with in terms of how much you automate, what you automate, and when do you forget about leveraging human touch? In that whole thing, right? In the my thoughts around what enterprises can do to kind of strike that balance, if you will, is really doing a couple of things. One, to be able to leverage automation for the right things, for the right tasks, right? Where they are repetitive in nature, where they are simple enough, like data entry, scheduling appointments, creating routine updates, things like that, are all simple enough, right? That frees up, human agents to focus on other things like we talked about, doing higher order things, being able to solve complex issues, what have you, those kind of things. So it's important to understand to be able to leverage automation for the right tasks, and and bring in not forgetting to bring the human where interventions are required, right? In terms of that, like for example, let's say for example, I'm thinking just off the top of my head here, let's say a travel booking platform that we often all use quite a bit for that matter, right? If we use a chatbot to answer some frequently asked questions, that is simple enough, right? What do I do for this, or where flight options or baggage allowances or things like that, right? If we can actually use routine generative AI chatbots or automated tools to be able to do that, then it frees up the human agents to be able to answer questions. Let's say somebody calls up to be able to say, you know what, this is my itinerary. I need to change this itinerary to a different date, different flight, different things to be used. That is not an easy answer to come from a chatbot. You want a human to be able to answer those kind of questions, more complex questions, right? Secondly, when there is emotional situations involved, I would hate to talk to a bot. I would hate to talk to, when I'm upset, I want to talk to a human. I want somebody to be able to understand my feelings, right? So, being able to implement and what we call as omni-channel customer engagement platform, right? What it means is that your customers can actually seamlessly change channels. I might be actually talking to a bot. I'm frustrated. I want to talk to a human being. And I know when I talk to a human being, I don't want to explain the whole thing I actually spoke to the bot. It should be seamless. They should be able to see and understand the context of what I'm, going through, right? The company should be very, very cognizant of not necessarily taking away that human touch when it is required, because of human emotions, right? Those emotional situations are very important, in terms of that. When a person calls in and they are upset, you really need a human to be able to do that. I don't think AI is at a stage where it can develop relationships. You need humans to develop relationships. That I think is very important for corporations to understand, that they should be able to empower people. They should be able to empower, people on, whoever is talking to their clients, to build those relationships, to make sure those changes in context are seamless, right? That somebody is not doing that 10 times over, in terms of when they actually come up with a problem, or when they call your contact center, or what have you, right? Those kind of things, right? Or those handoffs are very, simple and seamless. Those are probably, things that I would actually keep in mind in terms of striking a balance between really automating the heck out of everything and then using a bot for everything, versus, understanding where human interaction is absolutely required and being able to strike a good balance, where that is required.
Deepak, we talked about so much about Gen AI. Let's finish it talking beyond it. Like in coming next decades, what disruptive technology do you think will redefine automation?
Specific to automation, I think it is progressing pretty fast in especially leveraging. I think there are a few things that are coming together that is actually making a difference in terms of how it is progressing or how it is accelerating in the market, right? I think one obvious phenomena is the generative AI that we talked about. I think the other phenomena is the low-code platforms that actually use such technology, right? While low-code solutions were successfully implemented in the past by organizations, in terms of what they did, now, AI, making the headlines as it does, can only actually help the success of the low-code platforms, right? And those low-code platforms which don't necessarily adapt AI as a technology probably will be left behind, right? In terms of, these, one of the disruption will that will cause from an automation perspective, or these low-code platforms that actually incorporate generative AI in their functioning. I believe that's going to make a huge difference. Number two is what we refer to often as autonomous enterprises, right? We are looking at cars today that can drive by themselves, right? I think what you will see in the next couple of years is really the culmination of autonomous enterprises where processes are self-driven, processes are self-healing. They actually, based on the generative AI or other AI capabilities that are built in, can actually understand the data, can process the data, understand it in terms of the patterns that can actually help increase efficiency and productivity. They actually can determine that and automatically update their processes to be more efficient, right? That's what we refer to as autonomous enterprise in terms of what it requires to be able to self-organize, self-manage, self-optimize is what we typically refer to as autonomous enterprise. Third, I would probably say the IoT, Internet of Things, the industrial IoT, where there's today huge proliferation of devices that carry, bits of data, right? And all of this data comes together and it becomes a huge deluge of data. And humans and our normal processes cannot really process all this data And I think this is where some of the artificial intelligence will come into picture as well, going beyond, leveraging the, IoT devices, the data that comes from there to be able to make actual decisions in real time, and push it out there in terms of decisions and optimizing things. And lastly, I think I would say quantum computing, with all the efforts that are going on. I think it's not too far for us to be able to see, the computing at levels where humans haven't been able to think of, as how we can actually, compute in that sense, right? So I think quantum computing has potential to, revolutionize automation by solving complex problems that we haven't been able to solve so far. This could potentially lead to some breakthroughs in the future, especially in areas where it takes a long time, right? Like, for example, to be able to, in the material science field, to be identifying new materials, to be able to make significant progress in drug discovery. Taking from a molecule to be able to make it a drug, it takes a decade or more today, for that to happen, right? To be able to actually find a place where you may have oil, to be able to actually extract oil from it all the way to its decommissioning, it takes 10 to 15 years, right? And I think quantum computing can actually help really optimize some of those kind of complex problems that we solve with today, right? I think those are probably areas where, or technologies, I would say, that have disruptive capabilities in the near future.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you so much. Your insights were so concise and so comprehensive. It's so easy to understand what you're saying, what you're trying to portray. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you, Poonam. Thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I'll look forward to keeping in touch. If I can help with anything or answer any other questions that you may have in mind, I'm always more than happy.